Hey Apex Agents, Mobius Vi here with another video for Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer. Today's another two-part character build guide. We're taking a look at the Rare-grade Human Artificer. This is the kind of support character that I really like, and I've come to really appreciate this character over the time that I've played it. So much so that it's pretty much become one of my favorites, if not my favorite for the time being. I like these kind of character classes where they're largely built around helping out the team in some way, shape, or form, either defensively or offensively, but also has a really easy way to hand out its own level of offensive capabilities. So without further ado, let's just break down this particular character build. I went for maximum power utilization, being able to have all three powers at my disposal, as well as topping out personal survivability. So there was a bit of a sacrifice made in the potential damage output that could be done with this particular build, but considering the utility of all the powers available, it really doesn't hinder the damage output very much. So let's start with the breakdown of the powers, starting with Cryo Beam. Took this all the way to rank 6. At rank 4, I went with the extra recharge speed. That drops the base recharge time down to 7 seconds without the help from boosters or equipment. So it comes back really fast. Rank 5, I went with the radius upgrade. The brittle freeze would be really good for further debuffing armor, but I much prefer the radius upgrade, and I recommend it so that you can disable small groups of mooks in a single cast of Cryo Beam without having to individually target multiple enemies that are grouped right together on the same piece of cover. This is a bit of a lifesaver, and I definitely recommend going with this one over the Brittle Freeze option. And at rank 6, the obvious Snap Freeze, where shattering frozen targets causes additional damage to nearby foes, and Snap Freezes nearby defenseless enemies. Plus 200% frozen shatter damage. I am having trouble reading apparently. Plus 100% frozen shatter force and plus 150% frozen shatter radius. So this turns any frozen mooks and sub-bosses that do not have shields or armor and are frozen solid into miniature bombs. And if you remember the human engineer character build and the gameplay from that, it's very potent when you actually hit small groups that are clustered together with this, or even small spawns with a Cryo Beam and solidify several of them into a single block of ice. But it's largely used for debuffing big armored enemies, or just armored sub-bosses and bosses in general, as well as disabling sub-bosses that do not have armor, de-shielded sub-bosses, and groups of mooks. So that they're frozen solid, they fall on the ground, they can't really hurt you, and you're free to kill them or just ignore them for a little bit. Moving on, Remnant Vi. Took this all the way to rank 6. At rank 4, I like the extra expedited repairs, plus 50% VI health regen, and plus 80% VI health regen delay reduction. This helps keep the VI around a little bit longer, especially between waves when there's nothing going on. I value this over the recharge speed because you don't really cast it all that much already. The thing that'll most cause your VI to get taken out, I've found, is being downed yourself. And if you just wait to use either your self-revive pack or wait for somebody to come revive you, the recharge will go down quite a bit, so you'll be able to put your VI back into service shortly after getting back up. At rank 5, I went with the Close Combat module. The VI engages enemies at a closer range, demanding foes' attention, also improves VI health. This gives you a pet that helps distract people, gives them something else to shoot at to assist with your own survivability a little bit. It gives it plus 200% VI health, which is really nice. Makes it very tough to kill for mooks and weaker sub-bosses in particular. And then at rank 6, Detonating Missiles adds explosive missiles to the VI's arsenal in addition to its beam weapon. Missiles trigger combo detonations, so the missile does 450 damage per hit. It's got a radius of 2.5 meters, so if you snap freeze a small group of targets with your Cryo Beam, and you tell your VI to target the same enemy that you targeted with your Cryo Beam, then the missile will still hit them within that same 2.5 meter radius as well. And it shoots this missile every 6 seconds. This is your only detonator, so I don't really recommend skipping out on it whatsoever. Since the electric beam is a primer, I don't really see much point in going for it because you have no real way to detonate it unless you just feel like building the Remnant Vi strictly around maximizing beam damage. Because you take the rank 5 focus module, which increases the beam damage by a significant amount, and the rank 6 electric beam would increase it even more. But that's not really how I recommend going for this character, and especially for this build. Invasion took this all the way to rank 6. This is an awesome power. By default, it has a pretty long recharge time of 14 seconds. It gets a slight reduction with that at rank 2, but it's still 14 seconds. It still lasts a while. So in order to capitalize on that, I wanted to maximize the effect it has on enemies. At rank 4, I went with the increased radius. Invasion now infects up to 3 enemies near the target location in a radius of 4 meters. This can hit multiple people, even in a vertical radius. So, unbeknownst to you, you could hit somebody with invasion and somebody a floor above you on some kind of a causeway or a ramp or something also gets infected with invasion. Is pretty handy that way. Rank 5 Epidemic. Invasion now lasts longer and spreads to more distant enemies. It gives it plus 40% duration and plus 30% spread radius. This gives it an additional 2 meters of spread radius, so it should be about 8 meters. And the duration is increased by, I believe it said 40%, so at least another 5 seconds of duration. So it sticks around for a while. It's a very long-lasting enemy debuff. As you can see, at rank 1, it debuffs enemies by 30%. They take 30% more damage during the duration. Rank 6, Virulence. When an effective enemy falls below 15% health, Invasion triggers an explosion that damages the enemy and other enemies nearby. This is pretty cool on its own because you hit multiple enemies with Invasion, and while they're dying, it spreads to other people and whatnot. But it also just causes you to do more damage to large groups of enemies, and you'd be really surprised how much extra damage and how many kills you steal with this little ability. It is super handy. I definitely prefer it over the rank 6 Sabotage. Affected enemies do less weapon damage, which does sound really cool in and of itself. But in order to actually just lay waste to things and help get things killed better, I prefer debuffing large groups of enemies and having them cause a small explosion when they're about to die. So, just to recap here, you've got your Cryo Beam, which will snap freeze a small group of mooks or de-shielded, unarmored sub-bosses, and they will explode when they die. Invasion will debuff them for at least 30%. They'll take at least 30% additional damage, and when they're low health, they will create an explosion that damages nearby enemies. So you come across a small spawn of mostly mooks, possibly one sub-boss or a couple sub-bosses with shields. You hit them with your invasion, infect as many as possible as soon as possible, and then before they can spread out too much, try and de-shield something with your weapon, and then hit them with the Cryo Beam. And snap freeze several of them in place. So not only will they be debuffed and they will be infected with the invasion, which will explode when they're on low health, but when one of them dies, it will explode and damage more enemies around it. So the first thing that you try to kill will cause the invasion explosion to probably finish it off. It will explode from the Cryo Beam and damage everyone else nearby. It can set off a chain reaction, a pretty significant chain reaction. It's very rare when it happens, but when it does, it's actually really cool. And it's just super effective against small clusters of enemies. Offensive tech, I had to sacrifice something. Only had 1 point for this for plus 10% power damage. No big deal there. Most of the damage dealt is, most of the direct damage dealt, I should say, is with the weapons. And by not putting any additional ranks into offensive tech, we only lose out on 8% weapon damage, which really isn't that big deal. We also lose out on 20% additional tech construct damage and some combo detonation damage, blah, blah, blah. But nothing too significant to warrant sacrificing the utility of any one of these 3 powers or personal survivability. Defense Drone. This is a very interesting tech passive. When you put 1 point into it, and you initially don't have 1 point into it, it will deploy a holographic Omni drone to boost your shields and electrocute nearby enemies every few seconds. It does both this defensive and offensive technique on its own, and it has a cooldown on both of them. The base attack cooldown is 15 seconds, and the shield heal cooldown is 10 seconds. So by upgrading that, you get a little bit more... you get a little bit more use out of this defense drone, I should say. At rank 4, I went with the drone recharge because it reduces the shield cooldown and the drone attack cooldown. I found this way better than health and shield regeneration, in my personal opinion, because having this drone attack nearly as often as possible is extremely effective. It's another way to set up for combos. This actually primes for tech bursts with the rank 6 upgrade. We'll get to that in just a second. At rank 5, I went with defense systems. This increases your own personal health and shields by an additional 20% and also plus 20% tech construct health. This makes the Remnant Vi have quite a few extra hit points for enemies to work through. In total, an additional 35% additional tech construct health. So it's fairly tough to take down. It'll last a while. I like this over the drone attack damage and attack range meters. I only want the drone going off largely when I want it to, or when it's protecting me from enemies that are really close up to me. For example, Outlaw Adhees or Remnant Breachers. And at rank 6, Electrocute. Affected enemies are now electrically primed for the duration of the stun. So the stun duration increases for double time from 1.5 seconds to 3 seconds, and they are primed for a tech combo. You'll set off numerous tech combos during any one game when you're just sitting there and you're shooting at things, and all of a sudden, oh, a tech combo went off. You didn't realize that a Remnant Breacher or a Ket Wraith snuck up behind you. It got zapped by our defense drone, and then your Remnant Vi blasted it with a missile, and it set off a tech combo. It's really nice when your pets do most of the work for you. And of course, this character gets stronger and stronger as you get more veteran bonus. You do get more power damage, which is kind of nice, but the combo detonation damage becomes more potent as well, especially if you use that combo that I spoke of earlier, where you hit a group of enemies with invasion, and then you cryo beam a bunch of them so that several of them are snap frozen. Then your Remnant Vi shoots a missile at one of them, sets off a cryo combo, sets off the invasion explosion going off, and then several of them dying set off their cryo beam dying explosion thingamajigger. So it's just one big chain reaction, essentially. For equipment and weapon choice, I actually really like the shadow on this character. I do recommend some kind of a sniper rifle, because you want to try and keep things at range, and you want to stay a pretty safe distance. This obviously isn't 100% possible on every map. It's fairly map dependent, but it's nevertheless doable on every map in the game regardless. I have tried something like the Inferno, but for example, my Inferno in particular is pretty low grade still, and it's quite heavy. It actually reduces my power recharge speed and gives it a bit of a penalty. So I recommend keeping something fairly lightweight. Something like a Shadow is actually pretty good. I'm using the Bulwark variant because I don't have a Siphon variant myself. So if you have a Siphon Shadow, I definitely recommend trying that out. For equipment, my personal preference, and in the gameplay that will be following for part 2, Stronghold package gives you more total shields to your personal player, but also reduces the shield regen delay reduction so that your shields come back sooner. And that was one thing that I sacrificed with the character build. It would be kind of nice to have this regeneration because you don't have to sit in cover for so long, but you lose out on the cooldowns of your defense drones. Abilities. So I stuck a Stronghold package on there. You could definitely throw something else on there. Structural ergonomics to reduce the cooldown times of all your powers, for example. You could also do an engineering kit to increase the damage of all your tech powers. And of course, you could use a weapon rail amp, in this case a sniper rifle rail amp, or an amp for whatever type of gun you are using, just to increase your weapon damage output, as that will be largely your main source of direct damage. And then for boosters, I just threw on a sniper rifle rail amp and a targeted VI to help take down things really, really effectively. Go for those headshots. The Shadow is actually really good at putting out sustained damage on mooks and sub-bosses, and will kill them very quickly, especially with something like a targeting VI to increase the damage to their weak points. So, the general gist of it, like I said, you want to try and use your invasion and your cryo beam in tandem to keep enemies off balance and debuffed as often as possible. Most most regular-sized enemies, so like de-shielded sub-bosses that do not have armor and whatnot, they actually have an animation similar to if they were set on fire with, say, flamethrower or incinerate when they're hit with invasion. And that's not entirely true because armored enemies will do it as well. Things like the outlaw agents or the outlaw saboteur, they will do it when you hit them with invasion, which is pretty cool. And Cryo Beam will snap freeze and disable enemies that do not have armor, who have also been de-shielded. So you can use either invasion or Cryo Beam to essentially disable enemies from attacking you for a short while, letting you get free shots in, free damage in with your weapon of choice. Or setting them up for some kind of a combo. Against big bosses, you simply want to cast Invasion on them because it gives them a 30% defense debuff, and especially against armored enemies, definitely hit them with the Cryo Beam because it debuffs their armor by an additional 50%. So things like Big Ket Fiends and even Outlaw Hydras can drop very quickly with some sustained fire from the group and even from yourself if you hit them in the right spots with this combination of debuffs as well as your own personal weapon damage. So that'll sum it up for the character build. This took a surprisingly long time trying to explain all this stuff, but I hope it made sense, and we should see all this in action. Hopefully I get at least one frozen invasion explosion combo in the gameplay. That would be really amazing to be able to show that. So that you better understand what I'm talking about. Anyways, this was part 1 of today's character build guide. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Mobius Vi for Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer. For part 2, check the link in the description below for some gameplay on gold difficulty with this exact setup. I will see you on the battlefield. Good luck, Apex.